Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you join us today for our webinar, Mathematics Intervention Toolkit, High Quality Resources for Professional Learning on Effective Practices in Grades 3 through 6. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be here and to learn more about the Math Intervention Toolkit. We're so glad that you're here with us. Next. Today's webinar is hosted by the REL Northeast and Islands. REL stands for Regional Educational Laboratory. For anyone not familiar with the REL program, we are one of 10 regional educational laboratories from across the United States. The REL program is funded by the Institute of Education Sciences at the U.S. Department of Education. Our region serves 6 New England states: Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, as well as New York, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The RELs partner with educators and policymakers within that region, including state departments of education, to help generate and apply evidence to support student outcomes. We do this by conducting applied research, providing training and coaching and technical support, and disseminating actionable and credible research evidence. We conduct our work through partnerships within each of the states and territories in our region. Next. Okay, so before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items. We'll be using the Q&A feature for questions and comments. We'll hold responses until the Q&A portion, which will come at the end of our session. So please feel free to post your questions throughout the webinar. In addition, our moderators will be sharing links in the chat, so please keep an eye out for those. Please also note that AI note takers are not allowed and will be removed from this event. Live closed captioning is also available and can be accessed at the bottom of your Zoom screen. This webinar will be recorded, and the slides and recording will be posted to our website, and you'll receive an email once those are available. And finally, at the end of our webinar, we will share a link to a brief survey, and we would really appreciate your feedback as it really helps us to deliver future webinars. Next. So now let's move to introductions. My name is Kate Coleman, and I am a member of the Toolkit development team. And I'm joined here by my colleagues who you'll meet in just a few moments, Amy Brodesky and Emily Fagan. And we are also very fortunate to have Emily Veeder, who's the lead math coach for the Arlington Public Schools in Arlington, Massachusetts, and Michelle Sirwa, a math interventionist for the Milford Public Schools here in Milford, Massachusetts, joining us as well. Next. So here's our agenda for our session. We'll begin with an overview of the toolkit, followed by 2 interviews with practitioners. First, we're going to hear from Michelle, who will share a teacher's perspective on her experience in participating in the toolkit's course. Next, Emily Veeder will provide a district leader's perspective on using the toolkit to lead professional development sessions. Then we'll wrap up with a question and answer segment. Our goal is for you to leave with a clear understanding of the toolkit, as well as ideas of how to use it in your role. Now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Amy Brodesky, who will share an overview of the toolkit.
Great. I'm excited to introduce the toolkit to you. Next. Let's start by talking about the need to improve support for students struggling with mathematics. As these students move through the grades, they may fall even further behind their higher performing peers, widening the opportunity gap. Providing math intervention can help support students' current and future success. Math intervention is targeted supplemental instruction for students that's provided in addition to their core math instruction. In addition is key because we don't want them to miss their core math instruction. And 2 key questions on the minds of many educators are, what are effective math intervention practices? and how do you implement them with students? Next. Our toolkit's goal is to support educators and leaders in building knowledge of effective intervention practices and implementing them in their classrooms, schools, and districts. The toolkit offers free, high-quality resources for professional learning, including a course for teachers of math intervention. The course includes example math activities and instructional routines for teachers to use, but I want to clarify that it's not intended to be, and it isn't, a full intervention program or a curriculum for students. Next. One way that this course stands out from other professional development programs is that it's specifically designed for teachers of math intervention in grades 3 through 6. Participants may have many different roles, including being interventionists, Title I teachers, general educators, special educators, or others who provide math intervention. The course is designed to be led by a facilitator or two co-facilitators who might be school or district math leaders, coaches, or teacher leaders. In our math intervention work over the past 10 years, we found that districts implement intervention in many different ways. And so we designed the course to be applicable to districts with a wide variety of intervention models and structures. It's also curriculum agnostic. There are no requirements to use a specific intervention program or to have adopted a program. Teachers will be able to apply the strategies with their students and in their district's context. Next. Next. For many years, the one before, sorry. For many years, there has been more research on reading intervention, and math has lagged behind. But now there's a strong research base on effective math intervention practices. And that's the focus of the What Works Clearinghouse Practice Guide, assisting students struggling with mathematics. The What Works Clearinghouse has very high standards for educational research, and their researchers identified and reviewed 44 rigorous studies on intervention practices for students with math difficulties. Then they convened a panel of education experts to synthesize the findings and write recommendations. These recommendations include implementation steps and instructional strategies, and I'll show you examples shortly. So we designed the course to connect this research to classroom practice. Next. So how did we create a course on the practice guide recommendations? So we used many rounds of development, review, testing, many revisions during the past 3 years. We were fortunate to collaborate with practitioners, including a partnership of 12 district leaders who provided guidance, feedback, and suggestions. The materials underwent rigorous reviews by subject matter experts, including the amazing Karen Karp, who served on the expert panel for the practice guide. The course also went through several rounds of testing with intervention teachers, and in total it was tested with 98 teachers from 29 districts. And I want to give a huge thank you to all the people who were involved. Next. The course has 6 modules, and we used a modular structure to support in-depth professional learning and to offer flexibility in implementation. It starts with an introductory module, then it continues with one module on each of 5 recommendations: mathematical language, representations, number lines, word problems, and systematic instruction. The course provides about 28 hours of PD, which could be implemented over 1 or 2 school years. But you also have the option to use a shorter version or an individual module, and you can really tailor the course to your district's needs. Next. To get a sense of the recommendations, let's take a look at the one for number lines, which is one of my favorites, and I hope there are other number line fans in the Zoom room. So the recommendation says, use the number line to support learning of mathematical concepts and procedures, build understanding of grade level material, and prepare students for advanced mathematics. Now, number lines are a type of representation, so they could have been included in the representations recommendation. But the authors of the practice guide decided to make number lines a separate recommendation to emphasize their importance. Recent research indicates that the number line representation is effective for building students' understanding of fractions and other rational numbers, and that it's particularly helpful for students struggling with mathematics. But we also know that number lines can be challenging for students. Here are 2 recommended strategies for helping to build students' understanding of number lines. In the picture on the left shows an example of using concrete representations like fraction tiles to build number lines and partition them into fractional intervals. Another strategy is using kinesthetic activities like walking on a large number line on the classroom floor. In the photo, the student started at 0 and is walking to the fraction 3/4, helping to build understanding that a fraction's location is based on its distance from 0. Next. So what do educators do in a module? Let's imagine that we're all participants in the course and are starting the mathematical language module. We'll begin by learning about that recommendation by doing an online session, which includes videos, readings, and activities. The session is self-paced and asynchronous, so you can work on it at times of your choosing. It provides an opportunity to build your background knowledge before meeting with colleagues at a professional learning community session, PLC. At the 90-minute PLC session, which could be in person or virtual and is led by a facilitator, we'll discuss the recommendation, we'll try some strategies ourselves, and we'll learn how to use an instructional routine that incorporates the recommended strategies. After the session, we'll use the routine with our students at least once during the next 2 weeks. Then we'll come back together at the second PLC session to share our experiences, successes, and challenges, and plan next steps. We'll use this same sequence to explore each recommendation in the other modules. So this sequence of PLC sessions with time in between for classroom implementation is key to our professional learning model. It provides collaboration, support, and motivation for using the routines with students, sharing experiences, and strengthening practices. Next. The course includes 5 instructional routines that use evidence-based strategies from the recommendations. And to build teachers' understanding of the routines, we created videos showing them in action in intervention classes. This slide shows some photos from the classroom videos. The routines are designed to actively engage students in doing mathematics and talking about their ideas. For example, in the bottom photo on the right of the word problems routine, students use an act, represent, and solve sequence to make sense of word problems by acting them out, representing them with manipulatives like the tiles and plates in the photo, and solving them. Our goals in creating these routines were to provide teachers with ready-to-use routines that they could take and implement with students, and that they would be able to use more than once because they were investing in learning them. We didn't want it to be just a one-shot thing, and that are versatile so you could use them with different math content and adapt them to students' needs. Next. Here's an example of a card sorting routine called Sort, Explain, and Generalize. So we're very big fans of card sorts, except for the part of cutting all the cards. And some reasons we like them is students enjoy that tactile experience of moving the cards, putting them in categories, and they tend to find it to be low risk. They can place a card in one category and easily move it if they change their mind. The routine has a consistent sequence of 3 steps that can be used with different card sets for different math content topics. This example focuses on comparing fractions to benchmark numbers. Students are given cards with different representations of fractions. You can see some of them in the photo, and they need to sort them into categories: closer to 0, closer to 1/2, and closer to 1. In the first step, called Sort Cards and Explain Reasons, students work with partners to decide where to place each fraction card and explain their reasons using sentence frames. In step 2, Discuss and Generalize, the teacher leads a discussion about the fractions in each category, such as asking, what do you notice about the fractions that are closer to 1? In the wrap-up step, students complete an exit task individually and then share responses. The photo shows how the routine incorporates several recommended strategies, such as using concrete, semi-concrete, and abstract representations. There are fraction circle manipulatives, drawings of fractions as shaded parts of a whole, and numeric fractions. Another recommended strategy is to explicitly connect representations. We see the teacher pointing with one finger to the numeric fraction of 1/5, and with the other hand to its concrete representation as one of 5 equal pieces of a fraction circle. For the card set, we also strategically selected fractions to have denominators that can be modeled with manipulatives, which helps make them more accessible. Next. Supporting student communication is particularly important in math intervention because students who struggle tend to be hesitant to talk about their ideas. They may worry about being wrong or have difficulty expressing themselves using mathematical words. That's why we incorporated strategies from the mathematical language recommendation in all the routines. So let's look at 2 examples from the card sorting routine. One challenge with card sorts is that sometimes students sort the cards silently without even talking to their partners. So we use sentence frames to provide a starting point for students to finish and to provide a structure for partner conversations. Working in partners can help students feel more comfortable talking about their ideas before sharing with a larger group. In this example, one partner places a fraction card in a category and completes the sentence frame. The fraction is closer to blank, and they pick 0, 1/2, or 1 because blank, and they give their reasons. For example, one student places the fraction 7/8 in the closer to 1 category and says the fraction 7/8 is closer to 1 because it only needs 1 more eighth to make 1 whole. Then the other partner says, I agree because, or I disagree because, and gives reasons. This card sorting routine can be used for a variety of different math topics. The course includes other card sets on unit fractions, equivalent fractions, number lines, and word problems. Each has different categories, cards, and sentence frames for the specific math topic, but the routine sequence remains the same, which helps students know what to expect, and that can help them feel more comfortable doing the math and communicating their ideas. Next. A common challenge of math intervention is that there's just too much content and too little time. So it's essential to focus on high priority mathematics content. The routines focus on number and operations topics, including whole number, place value, fractions, decimals, and word problems. The same routine can be used with different math topics, and we provide a choice of problem sets so teachers can select those that fit their scope and sequence and their students' needs. Next. Next. This, no, sorry, back one, sorry. This slide shows a picture of the main course components, which are all freely available on the Toolkit website. And it includes the videos of the math intervention classes using the routines. And our participants have found these videos to be particularly helpful because most classroom videos are of general education classes. There are also strategy videos, such as the one pictured here in the middle, that shows how to use fraction tiles on a number line to model and solve fraction addition problems. Other key components are the example math activities and routines we've been talking about. Each module has a participant workbook with session handouts and ready-to-use materials for routines, like reproducible card sets and sentence frames. For facilitators, there are facilitator guides with detailed session agendas and slide decks with presenter notes. The leader guide offers guidance and tools for planning and implementing the course. Next. Now let's take a look at options for implementing the course. So as I said earlier, the full course of 6 modules provides about 28 PD hours. And this slide shows an example schedule for using the course during the school year. But you could definitely choose shorter versions or individual modules, and the leader guide provides a lot of guidance and suggestions and tools for ways to tailor the course to your district needs. So if you're wondering what would be a good place to start, we definitely suggest starting with the introductory module and in combination with mathematical language or the representations module. Next. So I'm now going to pass it over so you can hear 2 practitioners share their experiences using the toolkit. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy, and good afternoon, everyone. As Amy mentioned, we're going to hear from practitioners. So first, I would like to introduce to you Michelle Sirois of the Milford, Massachusetts Public Schools. Last year, Michelle participated in the full version of the course that Amy just talked about. Welcome, Michelle, and thanks for being here to share your experiences. Let's start by having you tell us about yourself and your intervention classes.
Sure. I'm a math interventionist at Woodland Elementary School in Milford Public Schools. And our school services students in grades 3 to 5, and there are about 1,000 students in our school. For those 1,000 students, we have 2 math interventionists. So in my role, I spend part of my day pushing into classrooms to co-teach, and the other part of my day working with students in small groups of up to 6 students in a group. And the frequency of these intervention sessions depends on the grade level, and that's due to the different schedules at each grade level. So this year, I work with 3rd graders 2 times a week, grade 4 students 4 times a week, and grade 5 students 3 times a week. And each of these intervention sessions is 30 minutes.
Wow, you're busy. Thank you. Thank you for that context. Now I'd love to dig into some questions to learn more and share with the audience about your experience. So let's start with a question about what did you find useful about the course?
Sure. So I've been teaching for about 13 years, and this professional development course, as part of the Math Intervention Toolkit, was probably the best, if not the best, that I've ever gone through. And I would say a few reasons for that. A major part of that is because everything that we learned as part of the course could be easily incorporated into my intervention lessons. As Amy was saying, it's not a particular curriculum, it's just tools and resources and routines that you can incorporate into any lesson or any structure of lessons. Again, the cyclical structure of the course was really helpful. So we did some work on our own, and then we learned a routine together. And then we had a few weeks to go and try that routine. And we knew that we would have to come back and share how that routine went. So that cyclical cycle really helped me as a teacher hold me accountable for trying out the routines. And I think once you try them, you got to see how effective they are, and that was great. And then finally, another thing that made it wonderful was when we signed up for the course, we were encouraged to sign up with at least one other math interventionist at my school. And so I was able to take the course alongside a colleague. And that was really useful because it gave me someone back at school who I could talk to and plan, and we could bounce ideas off together. So we were really working together to incorporate those routines in our practice.
Thank you. That's nice to hear about the cycle of the course and the support you felt through that collaboration. And to hear also about the ways that you implemented what you learned. Would you like to share anything else about how you applied the recommended strategies and routines with your students last year, or how you have continued to use what you learned from the course this year with your students?
Sure. So as I was taking the course last year, it really aligned well because my colleague and I were also working to revamp our intervention cycles for each grade level. So it really worked nicely for us to just implement the strategies and routines into the lessons that we were planning for each cycle of intervention. And this year, as we've gone and revised those cycles, we've been able to incorporate more of the strategies and routines, particularly our cycles for the beginning of the year where we hadn't learned as much yet. But even so, this week we were meeting and we were revising some fraction work in grade 3 for the last couple of months of school. And we went right back to the toolkit and the routines to see what would fit with the content we were planning. And I think that the way that we worked the strategies and routines into the course really depended on the content that we were teaching. A lot of the routines can be adaptable for different content. So for example, in 4th grade with fraction comparison, we've always really want students to anchor onto the idea of using benchmark fractions to compare, but we had always kind of struggled with that. However, we've found that incorporating the number line routine has really helped our students to start to think about and use benchmark fractions when they're comparing. So in that routine, you have a large number line either on the floor or on a desk, and students are just estimating where they're placing a fraction. But before they place any fraction, we always start with the same question, where we ask students, would this fraction be greater than 1 or less than 1, or would this fraction be greater than a half or less than a half? And so by continuing to ask that question, we're really anchoring in the idea of what a benchmark fraction is. I think another way that we've really incorporated the routines is building in students' mathematical language. So that's the first module is on mathematical language, but then it's also incorporated through all the other modules. And that's really done. Each routine always has sentence frames to allow for student talk, and usually also has like a vocabulary chart that you're asking students to use mathematical language. And I would say one thing that was different about these sentence frames for me was it was always like a frame for partner A and partner B. So when students were working in partnerships, it wasn't just a frame for one person talking, but there was always a frame for how the other person was going to respond. And I've found that that has really increased my students that talk in the classroom and the volume and answering and responding in complete sentences.
Thank you. Let's shift a little bit to hearing more about your professional learning. You did talk about the value of the course a little bit at the outset, but anything else to share about benefits of this course for your professional learning and your role as a math interventionist?
Yes, I would say a major benefit of the course was it gave me a fresh set of ideas to incorporate into my planning and teaching. And these were ideas and routines that I could include with a variety of mathematical content. So when you've been teaching for a while, some things can get stale. And this really was wonderful to have all kinds of new ideas that could be implemented pretty quickly into my own practice. I think additionally, I talked a little bit about this in the cyclical structure of the course, but it really gave me a lot of time to try out an idea and then reflect on the implementation with colleagues and then revise our work. And I think as educators, when we're trying something new, it can be a little scary. But it kind of, the course was like, you're going to try it and things are going to go well and things are not going to go well, and that's okay. And so it gave that opportunity to learn together in community and to be vulnerable, which was wonderful. And then I think finally, like the ideas that are shared in this course, they're best practices for intervention, but honestly, they're just best practices for teaching math. I mentioned part of my day I spend co-teaching, and I've found that many of these routines can be incorporated into the classroom as well. So for example, I know the Intervention Toolkit loves a card sort. We use IM. IM also loves a card sort. And I found just having a routine for student talk with the card sort where you have a partner A and a partner B response really increases the productivity of that card sort within the small intervention group, but also within a classroom as well.
And that's a really nice example of a connection of the toolkit to your curriculum program and how you were able to integrate some strategies there. Thank you. And lastly, you also have talked some about benefits to your students, but I'd love to sort of wrap up our conversation by hearing anything else about benefits for your students.
Yeah, I would say like the toolkit gave me a fresh set of ideas, and these routines and structures just are engaging for all students. And it's really increased the variety of lesson structures that I use to engage students in content. Also, many of the routines include manipulatives, and there's a tactile hands-on piece to it that students love. Just this afternoon, last group of the day, I was working with fifth graders. They had been taking their state test all morning, and we were doing a routine with fraction tiles. And at the end, one of the girls said, "It's like, oh, this was actually kind of fun in relation to the rest of their day." She's like, "We actually ended on a good note." So they really love that tactile piece. I think another benefit for student is that the routines really focus on creating representations. And so it just becomes a norm that everyone's going to share their thinking with a representation. And there's also this incorporation of the ability to revise your thinking. So oftentimes in a routine, a student might ask to make a prediction, but then later on within the routine, they're allowed to change their response once they've represented the problem. And that I've found both the representations and the ability to revise work has really helped build my students' confidence as they talk about math ideas. And then finally, I've stated this before, but the talk structures and the math language incorporated into the routine have helped my students explain their thinking in complete sentences and thoughts using accurate mathematical language. And I should also say, I didn't state this at the beginning, but our school also has a large population of English learners. And so I find that those mathematical language structures within the routines are very helpful for those students.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Michelle. And I imagine people may have some questions that come your way in the Q&A. So thanks so much. And we will shift now to hearing from Emily Veeder. So Team Emily here. I'd like to introduce Emily Veeder of the Arlington Public Schools here in Massachusetts. Emily has been involved since the early days of our development of the toolkit. She was a member of the Partnership for Mathematics Intervention, which was an advisory group of district leaders who provided input and feedback to us during the development of the toolkit. And last school year, 4 intervention teachers from Arlington participated in the same course as Michelle. And Emily is using the course now to offer the course for 25 teachers in her district. So welcome, Emily, and thanks for being here to share your experiences and perspectives.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you, Emily.
Yeah, great. So let's start by hearing from you about your role as a lead coach and about math intervention in the elementary schools there.
Great. So in Arlington, Massachusetts, we have 7 elementary schools, and each elementary school has both a coach and an interventionist. And as lead coach, I'm half a coach at one of the schools. I split the job with another coach, and the other half of my time is spent supporting the coaches and interventionists in all 7 schools. And several years ago, we shifted to a pre-teaching model for our intervention. So I'll give an example. In 5th grade in our curriculum, students start working on fractions in about end of October, beginning of November. And so we use our district data to figure out which students were kind of struggling with fractions in 4th grade. And then we've created some assessments. And from that, we pick a group of students to do this pre-teaching work in September and October in their intervention class while they're doing other things, multiplication and division and data in their tier 1 instruction. And then when they actually get to fractions, they've had all that time to kind of get up to speed. And so what we're actually finding is that our intervention students are then raising their hands in class and wanting to volunteer because they have that background and say, my math teacher, my intervention teacher taught me this. So that's really our goal and our vision. And then the intervention teacher, as well as doing these pre-teaching pullout groups, also pushes into class. So they can be there with them when they're doing fractions and say, hey, remember what we were talking about before? This is that thing we were talking about, or here's that representation we tried using. Maybe that would be a good tool for you. So building those connections for them.
Wow, that sounds really empowering to have those experiences coming into their classroom. That's great. Let's hear a little bit about your experiences with the course. Why were you interested in this course for your district?
So we've been offering Math PD as long as a long time. And our interventionist always said, but when do we get PD that's just for us? Like they go to all the Math PDs, but they're for general ed teachers. And so this course came along at the perfect time. And our interventionists were thrilled. And the 4 who took it the year before, I would say the people who weren't in that course were a little jealous. They'd come back and they'd say, we're not going to tell you anything about it because you're going to learn about it when you take it, but there are all these great routines we're learning. And so they built up such an excitement, not just from our interventionists, but also a lot of our special educators are now in the course that we're teaching this year. And we have some general ed teachers who have a win time, a what you need time, and they were trying to decide, what do I do during this time? I don't want to teach more of our core curriculum. I want something else to support these students. So this has been a perfect opportunity to be able to do that for all of those people.
And what did you observe about the experiences of the teachers who participated in the course last year? What were they saying? What did you notice in their practice?
So it was great. I actually as part of my job, I try to go and visit their classes, and we do a lot of work with videotaping each other and then watching the videotapes. And what we were starting to see was students starting to really talk. And I find that so often our struggling learners are also our most silent learners. But I think because of those early modules that Michelle was talking about, doing that language and the representations really early, and all the sentence frames give students a language, an ability to talk. And sometimes even when they can't think of the word, having the manipulative there and being able to point at what they're trying to say just gets them to start expressing their thinking, which is what we're really looking for. And that's even spread beyond just our students who are in intervention. A lot of classroom teachers are starting to use some of these ideas as well in their classrooms.
Yeah, that's nice. We've heard really positive things about the sentence frames, which is a tool that sometimes people have used in other areas, but maybe not as much in mathematics or in math intervention. So that idea of getting them talking is really, really great. Um, and how are you using the course resources to provide PD to teachers this year? I think the audience would love to hear about kind of how you've taken this to the next step.
So the materials I am so thankful for, as anyone who delivers PD knows, there's a lot of work in preparing, and to have these ready-made materials that I can then take and decide, all right, we're going to use just this little portion of the materials, or we're going to do this whole module, is fantastic. So some of the things in the modules that we use a lot are the videos, so they get to see students doing the routine before they go and try it with their own students. And we use a lot of any of the activities that we're going to have students do. We teach the routine and then we actually have the teachers do the routine themselves. And that's led to great discussions. There's one routine where the students have to sort a bunch of number lines and say whether they're accurate or not accurate. And there were great discussions with the teachers about, isn't that accurate? I don't know if that's accurate. And then I would be in a classroom and I'd hear all those same conversations. So it was really, I think it's been really good for all of us to have the opportunity to be the kids too, and just get to experience the routines for ourselves, have the sentence frames out and actually force ourselves to kind of articulate our thinking and reasoning. Because it helps us both see how difficult that actually is, and it helps us to know what kinds of things to listen for. So the materials have been really phenomenal. I go back to them all the time, and sometimes I just take them exactly as they are, and other times I think, oh, we have a special educator in this class who actually works with second grade. So how could we take this material, this routine, and now adapt it for some of the work she's doing with second graders? And so there are a lot of materials in there that have other versions that we can use. And then we've also started to create some of our own versions of those routines. Because I think the more we use the routines, the easier it is for students. They're familiar with it. And so then we can slide in all sorts of different concepts.
So that's a nice example of how you've tailored the materials to your needs there. Anything else about that, or you've talked a lot about benefits for, you as a math leader and provider of PD for teachers, and for students. Anything else you want to share about that?
Well, we actually, because we do this pre-teaching model and it's not based on any one particular intervention curriculum, because we found that we wanted it to be pre-teaching for our current curriculum. We take all sorts of the routines and have now been putting them into our curriculum and are constantly taking them and trying to revise other things. So for example, I know Amy was showing on the number line using fraction pieces to show the increments on the number line. We've been thinking, well, how could we do that with sticks of 10 and cubes to show students how those intervals with whole numbers, so that when they get to fraction number lines, it's not like this whole new concept, it's something that they're familiar with. So each of the modules has led us to all sorts of aha moments for ways that we can do these activities with students K-5.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. Thanks for sharing those perspectives. And before I stop, I just want to give you a chance. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we we move it to the Q&A?
I would just, let's see. I guess I would just say that the teachers who are in the course in their feedback have been so thankful for the routines and the materials, and often will say in their feedback, oh, I'm going to go try that tomorrow. And then sure enough, I get an email the next day with a video saying, look what I just did, look what my students were saying, or look what they were trying to do. So it's created a lot of enthusiasm. People have really enjoyed the course.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to pass it to Kate next. Thank you so much, Emily.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily and Emily. We are moving into the Q&A portion. And just to say, we've had some really wonderful questions come in throughout our session. And so we're going to get started with that. I'm just going to kick us off with the first one, and I'm going to just read it aloud first, which is, what is involved in implementing the course, and what roles do math instructional leaders and coaches have? And I'm going to toss that to Amy. Amy, would you be able to unmute and answer that?
Sure. I think Emily Veeder just gave a great example
Did.
of how she's adapted it to really work in her district setting. And there are a number of things involved. So I'll say, like, all the materials, the files, the videos, everything's freely accessible. But of course, there are costs to implementing it. So we feel that you need a facilitator or co-facilitators in the way that the course is designed. So the facilitator's time, participants' time, materials, and in planning to implement, really need to think about, what do you want to implement? Do you want to do the full course? Do you want to do a part of it? How will you schedule it? When will you meet? So we've been running the sessions at after school times because we've had math intervention teachers from a variety of districts come together. And we've been using the 90-minute PLCs, but I do want to say that there are options for other times that could be used for the PLCs. But that's a big part of like planning to implement, is thinking about what's the schedule and what's going to work. And I think maybe I'll pass it to Emily Veeder. I think you're doing it in like early release Wednesdays or something like that. So trying to find that time is can be a tricky part of it. And we do have a leader guide that has extensive planning tools, planning questions, sample schedules, and other pieces you could use. So, Emily Veeder, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I would. So as you said, it's our 90-minute early release PD times. And sometimes we will take a module and decide, oh, we actually need to do this over 2 sessions because the math is so rich and we really want to give people the opportunity to try it for themselves. So there's so much material there that I think it could easily be a 2-year course.
Great. Thank you both very much. Another question came in about PLCs. The question really is like, well, can you tell me a little bit more about PLCs? And is this a structure that you already need to have in place at your school? Because the person that's asking saying they don't. So how does that work? And let me just, Emily Fagan, I'm going to toss that to you, if that's okay, to answer that one.
Sure. Thanks, Kate. That's a great question. And no, you do not have to have PLCs already in place in your school, but they are an important part of the design. Michelle talked about the cyclical nature, and the PLCs are the a small group where you're learning and then going to try something in your classroom and come back to the PLC to share with your colleagues about your experiences. And we have designed the course so that the PLCs are 90 minutes long because we think that's a nice length of time, but we also realize, and as Amy just mentioned, that timing can be challenging. So we created agendas for 45 minutes and 60 minutes and even a 2 hour long agenda in case someone has a longer chunk of time. So yeah, so not necessary to have them now, and they're pretty easy to put in place, but essential, I think, to the course.
Great. Thank you, Emily. I'm going to ask another question that came in, which is, I love the toolkit, but want to know, were there any challenges that teachers came across when using the toolkit and applying their knowledge in the classroom? And I'm going to toss that, Emily Veeder, would you want to take a stab at that first? And then perhaps Michelle, also you might want to weigh in as well.
So I think initially, as people were starting to implement the routines, it was still hard to get students to talk to each other. And so I think being patient with that at first and realizing that there's this big long routine and maybe we only really got that first little piece of it. I think that was one of the challenges. And then I think the other piece is having the opportunity to do the math ahead of time has helped, but students still come up with things that were like, does that work? Or what are they asking? And that's where the PLC has been really nice, I think, to come back and talk to the team about that.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Um, Michelle, I'm going to go to you for the next question. Um, can you just talk a little bit more sort of about how you integrate the routines into your math intervention program? And it, it sort of talk maybe about, are the routines sort of a pre-teaching, or are they like their own thing, if that makes sense?
Sure. Um, our our program is similar to what Emily Veeder was explaining they were doing in Arlington, where we've done some work to really look at like what are the core standards of the grade level, and to align our intervention cycles with we're either pre-teaching for something that students are going to see, or they have just seen it in the classroom, and so we're doing kind of some teaching afterward. But I would say in either case, the routines are like incorporated into those lessons. So they're not a standalone, but it's ways for us to teach the concepts in different ways for students. And so, for example, we're doing some work right now with fractions for third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade. And the reason for third grade is they've just had their introduction to fractions. And we didn't want to pre-teach that because that's when they first learn about fractions. But in fourth grade and fifth grade, we know that they've all had the fraction content for the year, and it's going to be important for the beginning of the next grade level. And so what we've done is we've just incorporated the routines into the lessons and the structure of the lessons that we have.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to take the next question actually myself, which is, our intervention classes include multilingual learners, and will this course be helpful to our teachers? So just to sort of take that one and say the course focuses, as you've already heard, on evidence-based strategies from research on students struggling with mathematics. But many of these strategies align closely with the IES recommendations for teaching multilingual learners. So examples include, using sentence starters and utilizing small groups and pairs to support student communication, and graphic organizers to build vocabulary. Amy had mentioned earlier, these strategies really are focused in the mathematical language module. And just to also say that our pilot test and efficacy study included many school districts with very large populations of English learners, multilingual learners. And so, past participants reported the strategies were very helpful to address the needs of their learners in their intervention groups.
I don't know if Michelle or Emily want to add to that at all,
Sure.
or not, not to put you on the spot.
I didn't want to jump in front. Michelle, did you want to say anything? Or I can. I can
I
start
mean,
anyway.
you can start and I'll go after.
Which is just that, as with all of our students, I think the more we can give them a voice and some words to use, the more we can get everyone to be speaking. And so we definitely have students who are in math intervention who are also multi-language learners. And I see that again, like even if you don't have the word right away, being able to point at what you're trying to talk about with manipulatives gives you a way to communicate.
Great.
Emily, you said that great. I was just going to say the same thing that the routines, there's so much of the mathematical language in the first module incorporated into all the routines, but also there's such a huge focus on representations. So there's ability to participate and to show what you know, even if you don't have the language yet to talk about it.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for weighing in. I'm looking at time. I think we have time for one more question, and then we're going to move to wrap up. Emily Fagan, I'm going to send this to you, and but just someone asked, and I think this is an important one, like just any suggestions that you have for selecting somebody to teach the course.
Yes, another good question. Math coaches like Emily Veeder or math leaders or even a teacher leader, any of those people would be a great choice to teach the course. Ideally, someone would have strong math content knowledge and pedagogical knowledge, as well as some experience facilitating PD. But we also have a lot of Amy mentioned a leader's guide earlier, so we have more guidance in that leader's guide for how to select someone to facilitate. We have found some groups use co-facilitators. That's a nice way to share the load of teaching. So yeah, I think that's it on that, unless Amy or Emily want to add anything on selecting a facilitator.
I
That
think,
sounds good. And there's
I think,
lots in the leader guide.
yeah. And I think I was going to say, I think you answered it, Emily. Okay, so we are going to move to wrap up. I'm looking at time. I want everyone to get out of here promptly. So, here is a list of resources that are available on the Toolkit website. And we've already put the link in the chat, and we really hope that you take the time to explore the toolkit. And also, there's a QR code here as well. Next. And we just want to say a huge thank you again for joining our event today. There is, if you have any questions, you can contact Amy Brodesky. Her email is listed here on the slide. And lastly, just to say, to please take a moment to complete a brief survey and that really helps us design and deliver future webinars. And just a reminder that that survey will auto launch as soon as the room closes. We thank you again. We hope you have a wonderful afternoon and take care and have a great afternoon. Thank you.